away from that VIP table!
Craig Whitfield pointed across the room, voice loud enough to stop every conversation on the floor.
You think I don't see you? A black guy sitting at my VIP table. Like he owns the place?
Brittany grabbed his arm, not to stop him, to add fuel.
These seats are for people who actually matter, not every person who walks in off the street.
200 people stared. The black man at the table didn't stand, didn't apologize, didn't explain himself. He just picked up his pen, slowly, deliberately, and wrote one final signature on the document in front of him. Craig took 3 steps closer, chest out, voice dropping to something uglier.
Security. Come drag this filthy rat out of my sight!
He had no idea. That signature had just changed everything. Now what happened next? Nobody in that room saw it coming. All right, let's get into the story. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand the room first. Vertex Chicago sits on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower. Floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides. Lake Michigan glittering black in the distance. On a clear night, you can see 4 states. The venue rents for $85,000 per evening. There is a 3-year waiting list. Tonight, Craig Whitfield had paid that number without blinking, because tonight was his night. 20 years ago, Craig started Whitfield Technologies in a rented garage in Naperville, Illinois. 2 folding tables, 1 space heater, $17,000 in savings, and a business plan printed on paper he'd borrowed from a neighbor's printer. 2 decades later, 4,200 employees, offices in 12 cities, a successful IPO that valued the company at $2.8 billion. His face had been on the cover of Inc. magazine twice. He had shaken hands with senators. He had been quoted in the Wall Street Journal 14 times in the last year alone. Craig Whitfield had built something real, and he needed everyone in that room to feel the weight of that. The guest list read like a who's who of Chicago's business elite. Board members, early investors, technology executives, the kind of people who don't check price tags, not because they're careless, but because they stopped needing to years ago. Every detail of the evening had been curated by Brittany Whitfield. The centerpieces, white orchids flown in from Miami. The playlist, a jazz musician Brittany had personally hired after seeing him perform at a private event in the Hamptons. The dress code, black tie, strictly enforced. The menu, a 7-course tasting experience from a chef with 2 Michelin stars. Brittany had walked the room 3 times before the first guest arrived. When she reached the VIP section, a roped-off area near the north window, the best view in the building, she stopped and spoke to Patricia Norris, Vertex's floor manager. Nobody sits here unless I have personally confirmed them. Nobody. Patricia nodded. She had managed this venue for 11 years. She had heard versions of this instruction before. She said nothing about what she already knew. That was the first thing the evening chose not to reveal. Now, across the room, arriving quietly through the main entrance at 7:21 p.m., was Owen Turner. He came alone. No assistant walking 2 steps behind. No entourage. He handed his coat to the attendant at the door, said thank you, and meant it. His tuxedo was immaculate, but understated. No pocket square, no cufflinks that caught the light, nothing that announced itself. At the check-in desk, his name was not on Craig's guest list. The attendant looked down, looked up, reached for the phone. A 30-second call, a pause, then a nod, and a wristband placed on the counter. Not the silver one for general guests, not the gold one for Craig's VIP section. A 3rd color, matte black. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself either. Owen slid it onto his wrist, picked up his folder from the counter, and walked into the room. He didn't stop at the bar. He didn't scan the crowd for familiar faces. He walked with the quiet certainty of someone who had been in this building before, not as a guest, but as something else entirely. He went straight to the VIP table, sat down, opened his folder, uncapped his pen. Raymond Cole, Owen's senior advisor, a lean man in a charcoal suit, positioned himself near the east wall, close enough to see everything, far enough to be invisible. He checked his watch, then his phone, then the room. At 7:24 p.m., he sent a single text message. 3 words, "We're on schedule." Nobody in that room, except Raymond, knew what that schedule was. Across the floor, Craig Whitfield was working the crowd with the confidence of a man in his natural habitat. Handshakes, loud laughter, a hand on the shoulder here, a pointed finger gun there. He was performing 20 years of success, and he was very good at it. Then his eyes moved to the VIP table, and they stopped. A black man, sitting in his section, alone, calm, writing something. Craig didn't ask anyone who the man was. He didn't check with Patricia. He didn't find Stephen Harrow, his CFO, who was standing 40 feet away and would have told him everything. He just started walking. And that decision, made in under 4 seconds without a single question asked, was the moment the evening began to fall apart. Craig covered the distance in 12 steps. He didn't slow down, didn't soften his expression, didn't give himself a single moment to reconsider. The room was full of his guests, his employees, his investors, people who had watched him build something from nothing for 20 years. And there was a man sitting at his table who had no business being there. In Craig's mind, this was simple. This was his room, his rules. "Excuse me." Owen looked up from the document. His pen stayed in his hand. "This section is reserved." Craig's voice was controlled, professionally cold. "Private event. You're going to need to move." Owen held his gaze for a moment, calm, unhurried. "I'm fine where I am." Craig blinked. 3 words, delivered without aggression, without apology, without any of the social signals that usually followed when Craig Whitfield asked someone to do something. He wasn't used to 3 words like that. He stepped closer, close enough that the nearest table could hear every syllable. "I don't think you understood me. This is a VIP section. These seats are reserved for board members and major investors of my company. I know every single one of them by face." A pause, deliberate and heavy. "I don't know your face." Owen set his pen down, not quickly, not nervously, the way a man sets something down when he's decided he no longer needs it for the moment. "Then maybe," Owen said, "we just haven't been introduced yet." Something shifted in Craig's jaw, a small tightening, the kind that happens when a man realizes the conversation isn't going the direction he designed it to go. Brittany appeared at his left shoulder. She had seen Craig's walk across the room and followed at a distance, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to observe first. She was wearing a white gown that had taken 6 weeks to arrive from a designer in Milan. Her jewelry alone represented more money than most people in Chicago earned in a year. She looked at Owen the way she looked at a floral arrangement that wasn't quite right. "Do you have a wristband?" she asked. Her voice was smooth, charitable almost, the tone of someone performing patience. Owen raised his wrist. The matte black band caught the light. Brittany stared at it. Her brow moved, a fraction, barely visible. "What color is that?" "You should ask your venue coordinator," Owen said. "I'm asking you, and I'm suggesting you ask someone who can give you a complete answer." The smoothness left Brittany's voice like air leaving a room. She straightened. Her eyes moved from the wristband to Owen's face to Craig and back again. She didn't know what the band meant, and the fact that she didn't know, in an evening she had personally engineered down to the color of the orchids, was the first crack in the foundation. Craig didn't notice the crack. Craig was already beyond noticing anything that small. "Okay." He said the word like a door closing. "I've asked you politely. My wife has asked you. You're still sitting there." He turned his head toward the entrance and raised his voice. Not a shout yet, but moving in that direction with clear intent. Security. Tom Bradley, the venue's head of security, was a broad-shouldered man who had worked events at Vertex for 6 years. He crossed the room in steady, unhurried strides. He had heard the tone in Craig's voice. He had also seen the wristband on Owen's wrist from across the room. He stopped beside the table, looked at Owen, looked at the band. He did not reach for Owen's arm. He did not ask Owen to stand. He said, "Is everything all right here, sir?" And he said it to Owen. Craig's chin pulled back half an inch. "I called you over here to remove this man from my section." Tom looked at Craig with the measured expression of someone choosing words carefully. "Sir, I'm going to need to verify a few things before—" "Verify what?" Craig's voice climbed a full register. "This is a private event. I have a contract with this venue. That contract gives me exclusive use of this floor tonight. So whatever you need to verify, verify it somewhere else and come back here and do your job." Tom didn't move. "Mr. Whitfield, the venue contract covers general and premium event space. There are certain designations that operate outside of—" "I don't want to lecture on designations," Craig cut him off. A vein had appeared along the side of his neck, faint but visible to anyone standing close enough. "I want this man out of this chair." The room was fully quiet now. Not the polite quiet of people pretending not to listen. The raw, collective stillness of 200 people who have stopped all pretense and are watching something they cannot look away from. A board member named Wallace Greer, 61 years old and 22 years in the technology industry, set his drink down on the nearest surface and stood up from his table. He had known Craig for 9 years. He started moving toward the VIP section. He wasn't fast enough. "You know what?" Craig's voice had found its full volume now. Both hands came up, one pointing at Owen, one gesturing at the room around them. "I built this. All of this. This company, this party, this view. I paid for every inch of this floor tonight. I paid for that chair you're sitting in." A woman 3 tables away lowered her phone, then raised it again. "I have people here tonight who matter. Investors, partners, people who earn their seat at this table." His finger leveled at Owen. "You are not one of them. So I am going to say this one final time." He turned toward the door. His voice reached every corner of the room. "Security, come drag this filthy rat out of my sight." The words landed like something physical. Several people flinched. A woman near the bar pressed her hand briefly to her mouth. 2 servers exchanged a glance and looked away. Darnell Moore, Owen's oldest friend, sitting at a general table 20 feet away, was on his feet before the echo faded, hands gripping the back of his chair. Owen looked at him across the room. A single, almost imperceptible shake of the head. Darnell stayed where he was, but his knuckles were white. Owen turned back to Craig. His expression had not changed, not once. Not during the pointing, not during the shouting, not during those last 3 words that had silenced 200 people. He looked at Craig Whitfield the way you look at a man who is about to learn something he cannot unlearn. Patricia Norris arrived from the service corridor. She had heard everything from 40 feet away. She positioned herself between Craig and the table with the careful precision of someone who has managed difficult situations in expensive rooms for over a decade. "Mr. Whitfield," her voice was a controlled, professional instrument, "I need to speak with you about the seating designation for this area." "Patricia, I don't need—" "It will take 30 seconds. She did not move. "Please." Craig looked at her, then at Owen, then at the room full of people watching him. He straightened his jacket, reset his shoulders, the performance of a man reclaiming composure. "Fine. 30 seconds. Patricia leaned in close enough that only Craig could hear. Her words were measured and precise. Craig's expression changed. Not all at once. It moved through several phases in rapid succession. Confusion first, then the specific frown of someone rerunning information that doesn't compute. Then something that looked almost like a question, then something that had no name but lived in the space between certainty and its sudden absence. He pulled back, looked at Patricia. "What did you just say?" She repeated it. Same words, same quiet tone. Craig looked at Owen. Owen had picked up his pen again. He was reviewing the final page of the document in front of him, the one he'd been working on when Craig first walked over. The pen moved once, a single, unhurried motion across the bottom of the page, a signature. And in the corridor behind the service door, Stephen Harrow, Craig's CFO of 11 years, was running, his phone in his hand, his face the color of paper. An email opened on his screen, timestamp reading 7:43 p.m., subject line visible to anyone who might have glanced over his shoulder. Urgent. Turner Capital Acquisition. Final confirmation. He pushed through the door and into the main room and started across the floor, weaving between tables, looking for Craig. Craig was still standing at the VIP table, still staring at Owen, still trying to understand what Patricia had just told him. Stephen was 15 feet away when Craig turned, and the expression on his CFO's face told him everything Patricia's words had not yet made real. The room waited. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Wait, hold on. Craig really just yelled, "Drag this filthy rat out" in front of 200 people? Like, that's crazy. And Owen didn't blink, not once. I'm telling you right now, that kind of calm, yeah, that's not normal. That's someone who already knows this whole thing is about to flip. Stephen Harrow reached Craig in 3 more steps. He grabbed his arm, not gently. The kind of grip that says, stop moving, stop talking, stop everything right now. Craig, his voice was barely above a whisper, but the urgency in it cut through everything. "I need you to listen to me, right now." Craig shook him off. "Not now, Stephen." Turner Capital. 2 words, dropped like stones into still water. Craig went still. Stephen pulled out his phone, held the screen up. His hand wasn't completely steady. The email was open. Subject line first, urgent, Turner Capital Acquisition, final confirmation. Then the body, short, clinical, the kind of language that corporate lawyers use when they want zero ambiguity. Turner Capital Management has completed acquisition of 34.7% of outstanding Whitfield Technologies shares via open market purchase and coordinated block trade. Transaction effective 7:30 p.m. Central Time. Craig read it once, then again. His lips moved slightly on the second pass, the way they do when a brain is refusing to process something the eyes are clearly seeing. He looked up from the phone. He looked at Owen. Owen was still at the table, still reviewing the document, the signed document, the pen now resting beside it, uncapped, like a period at the end of a very long sentence. "That's..." Craig's voice came out wrong, too thin. "That's him?" Stephen said nothing. His expression said everything. The mathematics of the situation began assembling themselves in Craig's mind, slowly at first, then all at once, the way a structure collapses. 34.7%. His own stake in the company he'd founded was 31, which meant the man he had just screamed at in front of his entire professional network was now, as of 13 minutes ago, the single largest shareholder of Whitfield Technologies. The room had not returned to normal. It had the charged, suspended quality of air before lightning. Everyone still watching, still waiting, pretending to do other things while doing none of them. 3 tables away, a woman named Carol Hutchins, a technology journalist who had been invited as a guest of one of the board members, had her phone angled at a 45-degree angle. She wasn't being subtle anymore. Neither were the 5 other people recording from different positions around the room. Brittany noticed the phones before Craig did. She moved to his side, her voice dropping to something private and urgent. People are filming, Craig. Everyone is filming. Craig didn't respond. He was still looking at Owen. Craig, she touched his arm. Her fingers were cold. The champagne glass she'd been holding for the last 20 minutes had seen to that. Say something. Do something. You're just standing there. But Craig Whitfield, the man who had given keynote speeches to rooms of 3,000 people, who had closed billion-dollar deals across conference tables, who had never once in 20 years been the least powerful person in any room he entered, had nothing, because the ground had moved, and he hadn't felt it coming. Across the floor, Darnell Moore finally sat back down. His knuckles were no longer white. He picked up his drink, took a long sip, and watched Craig's face with the quiet satisfaction of a man watching a weather system correct itself. At the east wall, Raymond Cole checked his watch, looked at his phone, typed a short message and sent it. In Patricia Norris's earpiece, her assistant's voice, "Bloomberg just picked it up. It's live." Patricia kept her expression neutral. She had 11 years of practice, and at the VIP table, Owen Turner closed the folder, aligned its edges with the edge of the table, set both hands flat on the surface, the same posture he'd held when Craig first stood over him and demanded he leave. He looked out through the floor-to-ceiling glass at the Chicago skyline. Lake Michigan sat dark and vast beyond the light grid of the city. 42 floors below, the streets moved with the ordinary, indifferent rhythm of a Tuesday night. He had flown in from New York that morning. He had eaten a quiet lunch alone. He had reviewed the acquisition documents one final time in the back of a car on the way to Vertex. He had arrived at 7:21 p.m., 9 minutes before the transaction closed. He had sat down, he had waited, and the evening had come to him. Raymond's text landed on Owen's phone with a single vibration. He glanced at the screen. 2 words from his advisor. "It's done." Owen set the phone face down on the table, straightened his jacket, and looked across the room at Craig Whitfield, still standing, still staring, still holding the ruins of the last 20 minutes in both hands like something he didn't know how to put down. It was 7:51 p.m. In 9 minutes, the evening's program was scheduled to begin. Owen reached for his water glass, took a calm, unhurried sip, and waited for the clock to reach 8. At exactly 7:58 p.m., the LED wall behind the main stage flickered. It had been running a quiet slideshow all evening. 20 years of Whitfield technologies assembled by Brittany's event coordinator. Early office photos, product launches, the IPO bell, Craig shaking hands with people whose names appeared regularly in financial press. Then the slideshow stopped. A single headline filled the entire wall. White text on black background. Clean, unavoidable. Breaking, Bloomberg. Turner Capital acquires 34.7% stake in Whitfield Technologies. Becomes largest single shareholder effective 7:30 p.m. Central Time. The room read it in silence, then read it again. Someone said, out loud, to no one in particular, "What is happening right now?" Brittany turned to the LED wall, turned back to Craig, turned back to the wall. Her mouth opened slightly, the expression of someone whose carefully constructed evening has just been replaced by something she did not order and cannot return. Craig looked at Raymond Cole, the quiet man in the charcoal suit who had been standing at the east wall all evening. Raymond was looking at his phone, not at Craig, not at the wall, at his phone, with the composed expression of someone watching a process complete on schedule. Craig understood then. The slideshow hadn't malfunctioned. This was deliberate. Every part of this evening, from the moment Owen Turner walked through the door at 7:21 p.m., had been deliberate. Before Craig could speak, before Brittany could reach for his arm, before Stephen Harrow could position himself between his CEO and the next 60 seconds, Owen Turner stood up. The room watched him rise from the VIP chair that Craig had screamed at him to vacate 40 minutes earlier. He picked up his folder, adjusted his jacket once, a single unhurried motion. He walked toward the front of the room with the quiet, even stride of someone who had covered this distance in his mind many times already. He reached the microphone stand. He looked out at 200 faces looking back at him. The room was so quiet, you could hear the ventilation system running 3 floors up. "Good evening." His voice was clear, unhurried, no performance in it. "My name is Owen Turner." He let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. "I'm the CEO of Turner Capital Management." Phones came out across the room. Not to record something uncomfortable this time, but with the urgent, reflexive motion of people who needed to verify what they were hearing against what they already knew. What they found in the first 3 search results was this: Turner Capital Management, founded 2009. Assets under management, $4.1 billion. 23 acquisitions in 16 years. 14 of those acquisitions had produced returns exceeding 300%. A Wall Street Journal profile from 2022 had described the firm as, and the journalist had clearly chosen the phrase carefully, the most consequential investment operation most people in finance have never heard of. Owen Turner did not appear on magazine covers. He did not maintain a public social media presence. He did not attend galas to be seen. He attended them to work. As of 7:30 this evening, Owen continued, Turner Capital completed the acquisition of 34.17% of Whitfield Technology's outstanding shares, making us the company's largest single shareholder. He paused once more, not for drama, for accuracy, giving the room time to process a number before he continued past it. "I want to be straightforward with everyone here tonight. This acquisition was conducted entirely through open market purchase and a coordinated block trade. Every transaction was executed in full compliance with SEC disclosure requirements. Your legal and financial teams will have complete documentation by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." Wallace Greer, the board member who had started walking toward the VIP table during the confrontation, was sitting very still. His drink was untouched. His eyes were moving between Owen and Craig with the careful, assessing expression of a man recalculating a great many things simultaneously. Stephen Harrow was looking at the floor. Brittany Whitfield was not looking at anything specific. Her gaze had gone to the middle distance, the particular unfocus of someone replaying a conversation in their mind and hearing it differently the second time. "These seats are for people who actually matter, honey." Her own voice, 40 minutes ago, in front of 200 people and 6 recording devices. The diamonds at her ears suddenly felt very heavy. Craig stood at the edge of the room. He had not moved since the LED wall changed. He was still holding his champagne glass, had been holding it for so long the condensation had transferred fully to his palm. His face had moved through confusion, through the specific blankness of shock, and had arrived somewhere that had no clean name. Something between humiliation and the physical sensation of a floor giving way. The man he had called a filthy rat. The man he had ordered security to drag out. The man he had pointed at in front of investors, board members, journalists, and 200 witnesses with phones, and told he didn't belong. That man now owned more of Craig's company than Craig did. Owen looked across the room, found Craig's face in the crowd, held it for one moment, not with triumph, not with anger, with something quieter and more permanent than either. Then he looked back at the room. "I recognize that the timing of this announcement is unusual." The faintest pause. "I had intended to observe the evening quietly and make introductions at an appropriate moment." Another pause, precise, chosen. Circumstances moved the timeline. Several people in the room understood exactly what that meant. The sound that moved through the crowd was not quite laughter and not quite silence. It was the sound of 200 people processing the same irony at the same moment. I look forward to working with the Whitfield Technologies team, Owen said. I believe in what this company has built. I believe in where it can go. He set the microphone back in its stand. Enjoy your evening. He walked back to the VIP table, sat down, opened his folder to the next page. And the room, Craig's room, Craig's evening, Craig's 20-year celebration, exhaled in a single, collective breath. At the east wall, Raymond Cole put his phone in his pocket, allowed himself one small, private smile, then straightened his expression and went back to watching the room. The applause that followed Owen's announcement was uneven. Some people clapped immediately, the instinctive response of a room that needed something to do with its hands. Others joined a beat later, after checking the faces around them. A few didn't clap at all. They were too busy typing. Within 4 minutes of Owen stepping away from the microphone, the acquisition was the third most read story on Bloomberg's mobile platform. Within 9 minutes, it was the most read. The headline had been shared across 6 financial news aggregators. 3 technology reporters who had not been invited to tonight's event were already filing requests for comment. Carol Hutchins, the journalist at Table 11, had stopped pretending she was a casual guest approximately 45 minutes ago. She was typing with both thumbs, her untouched dinner growing cold beside her. Craig Whitfield was still standing at the edge of the room. Stephen Harrow reached him first. He positioned himself close enough to be heard without being overheard, and spoke in the measured, careful tone of a man trying to contain a situation that has already escaped containment. Craig, we need to go somewhere private. Craig didn't move. How long have you known? I found out 13 minutes before you did. The block trade was structured to avoid triggering early disclosure. It was, Stephen chose his next word carefully, sophisticated. Sophisticated. Craig repeated the word like it tasted wrong. Their legal team executed it across 17 trading sessions over 90 days. Each individual transaction stayed below the threshold that would have required public filing. By the time the aggregate position crossed 5%, Stephen stopped. Craig, we need to move. People are watching. People have been watching for the last hour, Stephen. That landed between them and stayed there. Craig finally moved, toward the bar, away from the center of the room. Stephen followed. Brittany fell in 3 steps behind, carrying her champagne glass and her silence in equal measure. At the bar, Craig set his glass down, looked at the surface of the counter for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes found Owen across the room, still at the VIP table, still working through the folder, as composed as he had been when the evening started. I need to talk to him. Stephen. Craig, I don't think that's... I need to talk to him. Stephen looked at Brittany. Brittany looked at Craig. Neither of them said what they were both thinking, which was that Craig had already said quite enough this evening. Craig crossed the room alone. He reached the VIP table and stood at its edge. Owen looked up. His expression was open, neutral, the face of a man prepared to have a conversation, not a confrontation. Craig pulled out the chair across from Owen and sat down. For the first time all evening, he was not standing over anyone. I want to understand, Craig said, what tonight was. Owen considered the question for a moment. Tonight was the completion of an acquisition and the notification of relevant stakeholders. Both of those things happened. You could have called. You could have sent Gerald Bradford. You could have filed the paperwork and let us find out through normal channels. I could have, Owen said. I chose to be here instead. Why? Owen looked at him steadily. Because I wanted to meet the people who built this company, in person, in a room where everyone was present. A brief pause. I thought that was the professional approach. Craig held his gaze. And what happened tonight, what I said to you, that's a separate matter. I want to address it, then address it. Craig was quiet for a moment. The sounds of the room moved around them, conversations restarting, the cautious return of the evening's ambient noise. But at this table, everything was still. I didn't know who you were, Craig said. Owen said nothing. I want to be clear that if I had known, Mr. Whitfield, Owen's voice was even, not unkind, but firm in the way that a closed door is firm, not aggressive, simply not open. I'd like to stop you there. Craig stopped. You didn't know who I was, Owen said. That's accurate, but I'd ask you to sit with what that actually means. He let that land. The question isn't what you would have done if you'd known. The question is what you did when you didn't know. And the answer to that question, he gestured once briefly at the room around them, is documented. The word documented carried the particular weight of a man who understood exactly how many phones had been recording and from how many angles. Craig looked at the table. A long moment passed. I was wrong, he said. The words came out stripped of performance. No boardroom cadence, no carefully managed tone. Just 3 words in the voice of a man who had run out of other options. Not because of who you are. I was wrong because of how I acted. I understand that. Owen nodded slowly. I hear you. Not, I forgive you. Not, it's all right. Just, I hear you. Precise, complete. What happens now? Craig asked. In terms of business, my team will contact yours Monday morning. Gerald Bradford will send a proposed agenda to Stephen Harrow by end of day tomorrow. We'll want to review roadmap, capital allocation priorities, and board composition over the next 30 days. Craig absorbed this. Board composition. Turner Capital holds 34.7%. That entitles us to board representation. We'll be proposing 2 seats. Who? People who are good at their jobs, Owen said. That's the only qualification I've ever cared about. A beat of silence. And outside of business? Craig asked. Owen looked at him with the same steady, unhurried attention he had maintained all evening. Outside of business, Mr. Whitfield, that's between you and yourself. I'm not in a position to give you what you're looking for from me right now. Maybe that changes, but not tonight. Craig nodded once, stood up, straightened his jacket, the same gesture he'd made dozens of times this evening, each time with less conviction than the last. He walked away from the table. Brittany was waiting near the bar. She watched Craig approach, read his face, and made a decision. She walked past him, toward the Vipe table. She sat down across from Owen without waiting for an invitation. Her posture was different now. The performance of the evening, the curated elegance, the social precision had gone out of it. She sat like someone who was tired of holding something up. I owe you an apology, she said. Not the same one Craig owes you. Mine is different. Owen waited. I asked you about your wristband. She said it directly, without softening it. I asked you in a way I wouldn't have asked anyone else in this room, and I knew what I was doing when I did it. She looked at him. I want you to know that I know that. Owen was quiet for a moment. That took something, he said finally, saying it that way, without the excuses. I have excuses, Brittany said. I just don't think they're worth your time. Something almost imperceptible shifted in Owen's expression. Not warmth exactly, but the faint acknowledgement of a person recognizing another person, clearly without the interference of the evening's noise. I appreciate you saying it, Owen said. Brittany nodded, stood, smoothed her dress once. She walked toward the elevator without stopping. She did not return to the party. The evening continued around Owen in the way that evenings do when the defining event has already occurred, with the slightly hollow energy of people going through motions that have lost their original purpose. Board members came to introduce themselves. Several had already researched Turner Capital on their phones and arrived at the table with the alert, recalibrated attention of people who understood that the power geometry of their professional lives had just shifted. Owen spoke with each of them briefly, directly, without theater. Wallace Greer stayed longest, 20 minutes, 2 cups of coffee, a conversation about the company's infrastructure investment pipeline that was, by any measure, substantive. He left having exchanged cards with Raymond Cole and scheduled a call for Thursday. At the bar, Craig Whitfield sat alone for a long time. Stephen joined them eventually. They didn't talk much. Stephen ordered a club soda. Craig kept his glass but stopped drinking from it. They watched the room that Craig had built in the most literal sense available to him, from an $85,000 venue contract and 20 years of work. The room that had, over the course of one evening, rearranged itself around a different center of gravity. At 9:47 p.m., Carol Hutchins' story went live on the technology section of a major national publication. The headline read, "Who is Owen Turner, the quiet billionaire who just became Whitfield Technology's largest shareholder? And what happened before the announcement?" The piece included a detailed account of the confrontation at the VIP table. It included the exact language Craig had used, documented in multiple witness accounts and consistent across all of them. It included a brief profile of Turner Capital's 16-year track record. It included a photograph, taken by one of the guests, of Owen sitting calmly at the VIP table while Craig stood over him. The photograph was taken at 7:34 p.m., 4 minutes before Stephen Harrow received the acquisition confirmation email. 4 minutes before anyone in the room except Owen and Raymond knew what was already done. In the photograph, Owen's pen is in his hand. The document is open in front of him. His expression is completely, almost unnervingly calm. The caption a reader would later add in the comments section was shared 11,000 times. He already knew. He already knew the whole time. By midnight, the story had been read 400,000 times. By morning, it would be read by 4 million. The morning after is always quieter than the night before, but some mornings are quiet in the way that follows an earthquake. Not peaceful, just still. The kind of still where everything that was standing is now in a different position and nobody has finished assessing the damage yet. Craig Whitfield woke up at 5:14 a.m. to 47 unread messages. He didn't read them in order. He read them the way you read bad news, scanning for the worst first, hoping to find something that softens the picture. He didn't find it. His personal attorney, 3 board members, his PR firm, which he paid a significant monthly retainer to handle exactly this kind of situation. 2 journalists requesting comment, his eldest daughter, who had seen the story shared by a college friend and sent a single question mark in a text message at 1:30 in the morning, and Stephen Harrow at 6:02 a.m. Board wants an emergency session. Thursday, non-negotiable. Craig set his phone face down on the nightstand, stared at the ceiling. 42 floors above Chicago street level, he had spent 20 years building something, and in the space of one evening, one decision made in 4 seconds without a single question asked, he had handed the people who held that something a reason to look at him differently. Not just Owen Turner, everyone. The board convened on Thursday, as Stephen had said, non-negotiable, as he had also said. 7 members around a table that Craig had sat at the head of for 11 years. The meeting lasted 3 hours and 14 minutes. Craig's attorney was present. Turner Capital's legal team joined by video. The outcome was formal and specific. Craig Whitfield would remain CEO of Whitfield Technologies. That was not in dispute. What was in dispute and what was resolved with the particular cold efficiency of people who have lawyers in the room was everything around it. Whitfield Technologies would issue a formal public statement acknowledging the incident at the anniversary event. The statement would not use passive language. It would not say if anyone was offended. It had been reviewed by Turner Capital's team before release, and Owen's one request had been simple: say what happened, accurately, without cushioning it. The statement went out at 11 a.m. on Friday. It said what happened, accurately, without cushioning it. Additionally, and this was the part that the business press covered most extensively, Turner Capital formally proposed 2 new seats on the Whitfield Technologies Board of Directors. Both candidates were presented with full professional profiles at the Thursday meeting. Both were approved, with 5 votes in favor and 2 abstentions. Neither abstention was Craig. He voted yes. The new board members were announced the following Monday in a joint press release from Whitfield Technologies and Turner Capital. Both were exceptionally qualified. Both happened to be black. Neither of those facts was incidental, and Owen, in a brief statement accompanying the release, said so directly and without apology. These are the best people for these roles, full stop. If the composition of this board now more accurately reflects the breadth of talent that exists in this industry, that is not a coincidence. It is a choice. Boards should look like the world they operate in. The release was shared 40,000 times in the first 6 hours. For Craig, the consequences continued in the register that consequences often choose, quietly, persistently, in the reactions of people who say nothing directly but adjust their behavior in ways that accumulate. 2 keynote invitations were withdrawn without explanation. A business introduction he had been counting on for months simply stopped being returned. At a dinner 3 weeks later, a man he had known for 8 years greeted him cordially and moved on quickly. And Craig understood, from the specific texture of that cordiality, exactly what it meant. Britney's lifestyle brand lost its largest sponsorship within 72 hours of the story breaking. The company's statement cited a routine review of partnership alignment. Nobody was fooled. Britney issued no public response. She had already begun a quieter kind of accounting, the kind that happens in private, without an audience, without the possibility of being performed for anyone's benefit. The video, captured across 6 phones from 6 angles, remained online. It was not taken down. There was no legal mechanism to take it down, and Owen had made no request that anyone try. It simply existed, as documentation tends to do. And at 9 a.m. on the Monday following the board vote, Owen Turner walked into the Whitfield Technologies headquarters on West Monroe Street for the first time. He took the elevator to the executive floor. He greeted the receptionist by name. He had learned it from the company directory the night before. He accepted a cup of coffee, said thank you, and meant it. Craig was waiting in the conference room. They shook hands across the table. 2 men who had met, in the most consequential sense, 42 floors up on a Tuesday night, in a room full of people who would never entirely forget what they had witnessed. The meeting lasted 2 hours. It was, by all accounts of those present, entirely professional. There is a photograph that circulated widely in the weeks after that Tuesday night, not the one taken during the confrontation, the one of Owen sitting calm at the VIP table while Craig stood over him. That photograph had already done its work. This one was different. It was taken by Raymond Cole on his phone at 9:23 p.m., after the announcement, after the conversations, after Britney had taken the elevator down and the room had begun to empty. It shows Owen standing alone at the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Lake Michigan is a dark, flat expanse in the distance. The city's lights are reflected faintly in the glass in front of him. He isn't posing. He doesn't know the photo is being taken. He just looks like a man who is finished with something, and at peace with how it finished. Raymond posted it once, briefly, with no caption. He took it down after an hour, but by then it had been saved and reshared thousands of times. The caption that strangers attached to it, over and over, in different languages, was almost always some version of the same thing. He never needed to prove anything. He already knew. Owen released one public statement in the weeks that followed, posted on the Turner Capital website. 6 paragraphs, written by him, not a PR team. He did not describe the evening as a victory. He did not name Craig Whitfield. He did not use the word justice, because he said, carefully, in the 3rd paragraph, that what happened to him was not justice. Justice would have been not needing a $4.1 billion portfolio to be treated with basic dignity in the first place. He wrote about the people standing nearby with their champagne glasses, not with blame, with honesty. Silence in those moments, he wrote, is its own kind of decision. He wrote about the people who face the same moment without what he has, without the wristband, without the folder, without Raymond Cole at the East Wall. My story ended the way it did because of what I had built over 16 years. But the moment itself, the words, the finger pointed, the command to be removed, that moment does not care about your portfolio. It only cares about what you look like. And that is the thing worth sitting with. The statement was read by 6 million people in the first week, translated into 14 languages, assigned as reading in 3 university business ethics courses the following semester. And at Vertex Chicago, the LED wall now runs a different slideshow on Tuesday nights. One that includes a quiet acknowledgement of the evening that changed how the venue trains its staff, reviews its access designations, and responds when something goes wrong in a room full of people who could have spoken up sooner. Small changes, real ones, the kind that don't make headlines, but make rooms incrementally safer for the next person who sits down and shouldn't have to prove a single thing to stay there. All right, real quick. Yeah, the story about Owen, that part's fictional. But that feeling he had, sitting there while someone tells you don't belong and the whole room's watching, yeah, that part's real. That happens to people every single day. Most of them don't have some folder on the table or a $4.1 billion portfolio backing them up. So I'm actually curious. If you were sitting in that room, would you have said something?